watch it. So, this Google thing, I mean, I don't think anybody watches it from that page. So just talk whatever kind of shit you want. I don't think there's any reason to sugarcoat it this time.
Well, good. I'm glad you say that because we're live. Welcome to RotoWire TV. Chris Liss, Jeff Erickson here. This is the Fire Jason Garrett edition. Mike Gottlieb is being a drug mule again. This time he went to the Czech Republic to go sell some of that pure blue. Hopefully he makes it back, doesn't get stopped at customs.
Yeah, or the balloons don't burst.
Videos for us.
Balloon bursting is the biggest risk to a drug mule, by the way.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But, and of course, he does all the work in posting these for us. So get back, Mike, soon. We miss you.
Right. Otherwise, we don't care. But it's a good way to go. If you're going to go, that's probably one of the best ways. The burst, you're super high, and then that's it. All
right. Week 8, NFL, Jason Garrett screwed up again in the end game, but let's blame Dez Bryant.
Yeah, I just feel like everyone knows. Come on, everyone with half a brain knows Jason Garrett is like one of the most cowardly probabilities, the field possession equity. He gives away points, and then in the end, it's either Romo's fault or Dez Bryant. And Jason Witten, I don't know what he was saying. I don't want to presume to know what was said on the sideline, but go yell at your coach. I mean, why are you yelling at your best player? Why are you yelling at the guy who's been the best player for the last calendar year on your team? Because you're an idiot. Just go talk to your
he's got to be the guy that looks good. Come on, do the right thing.
Yeah,
right. All that. Although in fairness, I think what I've heard was that Witten was saying, "Hey, we still have time. Let's try to do this."
Okay. In that case, he gets a pass. I don't know what he was saying.
Blame it on the coaching staff because Dez, he was rightly upset at the play calling. He was rightly upset at the fact that they were going so conservatively. And this is one of Dallas's big problems. Their MOs under Jason Garrett. I think you mentioned either on the show today or in abortive attempts to film this earlier that ever since Jerry Jones decided not to have a strong figure as a head coach, it's backed up on him like this.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about abortion, Jeff. I just want to talk about football. It's basically Wade Phillips and Jason Garrett both are the kind of guys that will do what Jerry Jones says, but those kind of guys constitutionally are not the kind of guys that will do the right thing according to the math, regardless of what the pundits and the media and the fans will say. And so you can't have it both ways. If you're going to get Bill Parcells or Jimmy Johnson or Bill Belichick, if you're going to get a coach that has the courage to do the right thing, then he's also going to have the courage to stand up to the owner. So you can't have it both ways. You can't own your coach. You can't have your coach be your lackey and then also expect your coach to have the courage to do the right thing. It doesn't work that way.
Right, exactly right. And this is an NFL-wide thing, too. I mean, look at the Jets under Rex Ryan, for crying out loud. Down 35-6. They punt on 4th and 2 from their own 39. Then they kick a field goal down 29 points. A 4-score game? It's still a 4-score game. And the worst was the Redskins, punting twice in Denver territory, 4th and 2, 4th and 5. What is Mike Shanahan thinking?
He's not thinking. He's just not thinking. And I don't know if the myth of Shanahan, is Shanahan that good of a coach? I mean, in 1999, it seemed like he was a good coach. This is 2013.
Well, John Elway, so that goes pretty far right there, doesn't it?
John Elway at his peak. They didn't win a Super Bowl with peak John Elway. They won it later when Elway was just a caretaker and Terrell Davis was, the best back of his era, his short era that he played. And is that was Shanahan instrumental in that? Maybe. Maybe sometimes the strategies that worked, the philosophy that worked, is now outdated. There's poker players in the '90s that were the best, and they wouldn't win now. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe Shanahan's a good coach. I really don't have an idea. It seemed like they were good last year with RG3 and Alfred Morris. They surprised some people, but they haven't adjusted, or something's gone wrong. And so, RG3, I was touting him last week. I would buy him low. I don't know if he'll be sold low, but I don't think, I have to back off of that stance. I thought he was a top 5 QB. Maybe he's top 10 now. Maybe he's top 15. I don't know. But it was a really disappointing performance against Denver, who's been awful. The other guy that I was touting was No. Moreno, and he had a good game, but there's, they want a committee there. They are not committed to Moreno the way it seemed like they were for a minute a couple games ago. They want C.J. Anderson worked in. They want Monte Ball worked in. Monte Ball got a touchdown. That's not a good sign. If you're Moreno and you're the dominant back in this, and he's probably still the top back, but you don't want to give away goal line carries. You don't want to come out randomly at different parts of the game. And those other guys are good enough that they could get on a nice run. They didn't really, right. But it seemed like if they got a couple carries and got going, they could maybe establish themselves.
I think the answer to the "is Shanahan good?" question is like most evaluation questions is somewhere in between. He's good at a lot of things. He's not so good at this one particular thing that we noticed. And there's a lot of stuff he's good and bad at that we're not capable of evaluating just because of the nuances of what it means to be a head football coach in the NFL. There are certain polls, like Belichick, I think we can safely say is a very good head football coach. Greg Schiano, I think can safely say is a very poor NFL football coach. And then there's the middle.
Yeah, I think Belichick, especially when he's got video of what the other team's doing that the team doesn't know that he has, he's very able to capitalize on that. A lot of coaches would see that video, not know what to do. He knows what to do with the video.
He's a good video analyst. There you go. He's a good technician.
Yes.
No, but I think there's a lot of things. There's a lot of gray, but yeah, you have to question things. I mean, you have to question a lot of the in-game management. You have to question a lot of the mentality and why coaches do certain things.
So Andy Dalton has 16 touchdowns through 8 games. How many touchdowns does he finish with at the end of the year?
Well, let's see. He's had, in those 8 games, I think there's been 11 of those touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. So we're riding a high right now. I'll say 13 more touchdowns the rest of the way. Ends up with 29.
Okay. How many does Tom Brady have right now?
Like 8, 9?
9,
right?
So does Brady over/under on total touchdowns 22 or higher or lower?
I think it's because he's got Gronk. I'll say. Oh, we were having this debate earlier, man. You're putting me in a corner here. Don't do that.
No, but you got to
21. 21. I'm going to go with Dalton over Brady the rest of the way.
But 12 touchdowns for Brady, 13 for Dalton the rest of the way.
Yeah.
So Brady finishes with 21 touchdown passes. That is low. That is extremely low.
Yeah, but I know he's got. So here's the thing, because he's got such a ridiculously good track record. You keep on wanting to say it's Brady. He'll figure it out. Now he's got his weapons back. He'll figure it out. Well, he still hasn't figured it out. What happened against the Dolphins? This should not have been a thing. Is his finger really a problem?
They won, though. They won. He didn't have to figure it out. Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, and he's got a really tough schedule coming up.
All right, good.
What's that?
We got dueling. Here's the things.
All right. Said at the same time. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what the thing is, then you can tell me what it really is. Okay. The Patriots are 6-2, right? Which is just fantastic if you're missing Gronk. Okay, that's just a great record for the first half of the season, and that's a 12-4 pace. And so Brady, for all his horrible play, and he's getting less than 6 yards per passing attempt, is only he doesn't have to do more, right? But in some of these other games against these, even though the defense is maybe better, you assume they're not going to be able to keep up the winning while he has this horrible showing. And he's getting his weapons back. You think that he's going to do more. Now, you could say, well, the schedule gets tougher. But isn't this a Hall of Fame, all-time great quarterback who's ostensibly healthy, who is still in his late peak the last 2 years? I mean, shouldn't he be able to overcome this? And it really makes you wonder. He should be able to do it. And if the Patriots were 3-5, I think Brady would have a lot bigger numbers. But is there no, you can't fault him. It's kind of like a pitcher. People say, oh, he won 20 games. Who cares? His ERA is 4. But if you're up 7-2, you just throw strikes. Do you know what I mean? If one gets hit over the fence.
Yeah, but Brady's not throwing strikes. That's the thing. Well, I think you're presupposing that your argument suggests that he's playing to the score. He's pitching to the score.
What I'm saying is the team play calling is to the score. The entire thing is to the score. You're getting too literal.
They had
strikes.
To come back yesterday. They were down 17-3.
Right, and they did.
And he still has
won.
crappy numbers.
Right, but they came back and won.
Not so because of him, though.
Well,
it wasn't because of him.
It might not be because of him, but it didn't need to be because of him. Obviously, because they won without him playing particularly well. So, in other words. And again, you don't get too caught up in the strike analogy too literally. When a pitcher's throwing strikes every time because they're up 7-2, that doesn't mean he's pitching great. That's not the optimal way to pitch, is to throw the ball down the middle every time. But if you have command issues, it probably is better to just let him get out as much as you can and not risk walking people when you have a huge lead, because base runners are the enemy. And so you can have a pitcher just, be like, I don't need to do that much right now. I just need to keep people from getting the free pass. And maybe he's doing the same thing, and maybe the coaching staff is calling plays with these inexperienced receivers that are not that aggressive, that are not, he doesn't need to do much. They're running the ball more. They're scoring on it. They're getting turnovers on defense. I'm not saying this is a sufficient explanation for everything, but when you're 6-2, it's hard to look at the quarterback and say, you know what, he's just not throwing downfield enough, or he's not doing this enough. Well, I mean, what can you say? I mean, they're winning. And the games they lost.
I don't know. See, and I think it's more like the Redskins-Broncos analogy. RG3 is playing terribly. They still happen to be winning 21-7 in the third quarter, but he's playing terribly, and at some point it catches up with them. And I think that some point of catching up with the Patriots is coming. They've been beat they got beat by the Bengals. They got beat by the Jets. They got a miracle win against the Saints. They had to catch up against the Dolphins. They're 2-2 in their last 4 games. They're not playing all that well right now. And their defense is much worse than it was at the beginning part of the season. They're not going to get that.
Is it much worse? Is it much worse?
Yeah, it is. I mean, no Mayo. And Talib's been missing games.
Talib's healthy now. I mean, Mayo and Wolford are two of the most overrated players in football. I mean, an above-average run clogger is really going to make a difference.
Okay. Maybe not Wolford, but I don't know. But all I know is I don't think it's clear sailing for this team going forward.
Right. Maybe not. But if it's not, that should be where you see the test, right? It's got to be. I mean, he didn't do it against the Jets. I mean, he needed to do it against the Jets, and he didn't. So that's a strike against him, right? He needed to do it, didn't get it done. Same thing with the
Arguably,
Bengals.
he needed to do it against the Dolphins. He didn't realize that they're going to get. If every time you could fumble and have a guy punch the ball away and get a penalty from 15 yards the other way and get a new set of downs, you can count on that.
They probably would have lost had that not been called, because they would have had the ball way back. They might have had to even punt on that series, and then Dolphins get the ball back. You're right. It is possible that the whole thing. I mean, that was such a BS backdoor cover. Maybe so. Maybe even. But I'd like to. If you look at YPA, and you don't want to get too caught up in just one stat though, but YPA really increases, and you look at yards per target among receivers, it's always the downfield guys that have bigger yards per target. It's always the short guys who have smaller yards per target. Well, it's not, of course, because they catch a higher percentage of the targets thrown their way. But even with that handicap of fewer targets being caught, it's still a bigger bang for your buck when you go down the field. So the play calling does affect YPA a lot. That's not in the quarterback's hands sometimes. If they're throwing a lot of downfield, I mean, Andy Dalton's YPA is going to look good with that play calling they had last week against the Jets. Because he's attacking down the field. So I wonder if you get more of that out of necessity, you get some of these receivers back, you get a better timing and rapport with them, that Brady does turn it around. But you're right. Probably my theory was crap that I just put before. But I tried something.
But it's out there at least. Now let me ask you this. Put it in fantasy terms. Are you going to try to trade for Brady? What's the over-under number of touchdowns you give him for the second half of the season?
I'm going to say over/under. I mean, forget about injuries, healthy, because you got to price all that in, which is annoying. But just forget about
especially because of his.
I'm going to say 14, or maybe 15 even. I think he's probably with Gronk a 28 to 30 touchdown full season guy. I know that the defenses are tougher, but that might make the run tougher, which might make him have to throw more. The other variables, they've been running successfully. They've got a whole bunch of different guys, so it doesn't look like that, but you add it up, and it's been a lot of running production. And that hurts the QB, and obviously Belichick doesn't care how they get their touchdowns as long as they get them. But I'm going to say 14.5 is the over.
Okay, you're a Matt Ryan owner. You voiced reservations about him because of his poor weapons and poor offensive line for the second half this season. I know you have him in at least a couple of leagues. Are you going ahead and offer Matt Ryan for Tom Brady straight up, especially –
yes,
maybe after Brady's bye, but
yes.
Are you going to do that?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Matt Ryan.
I expect to see a trade announcement because I bet you that the Brady owner will accept that offer.
Okay, I might do it. I mean, that might not be my first choice. So my first choice might be to go get Jake Locker or somebody with real upside.
Okay.
With real receivers who's fast. Jake Locker looks like Russell Wilson. That's what he looks like out there now. I mean, last few games, running around, slinging the thing, on the move.
Just having fun out there, right?
Well, I mean, he looks like he's running and able to sling the ball, accurately, which is something he didn't put together. And he'd either run or pass poor. He didn't seem to be able to do both. And now he seems like Russell Wilson, who's a guy who is very mobile, small, but able to, gun the ball downfield.
Yeah, I am somewhat fond of Locker. I had him in the Stopa League. I cut him because I needed the spot. P&L sneaked him up on me, or someone grabbed him when he
P&L,
was announced. And that was annoying to me. Although I grabbed Case Keenum for free, so it's not terrible. In that league, we do start 2 QBs, so it's nice to get anybody that's going to get a start. Tell me about Case Keenum. Is he even a factor for you? Would you look at him in like these 2 QB leagues as like a 15 to 20 overall quarterback, possibly?
I can't answer that question. I don't know anything about the guy. It's just not an interesting question to me.
Okay, moving on. What is interesting? What else do you want to talk about here?
See, this is the thing. Like, there's a guy who's new. Like, Case Keenum comes on the scene and he does okay, and then there's like a guy like Mike James. He's the new guy, or Andre Ellington has a big game, and Andre Ellington's been talked about for weeks before. And everyone's got to talk about that, right? Like, you're obligated to talk about that because it's on the waiver wire and all that. But isn't that like the most boring part of fantasy football? The random new guy that comes up that like everyone's like, oh, is he the guy? Is he not the guy? Who knows? Who cares? I mean, you gamble.
I think it's context dependent. I think if it's on an interesting team, then it's still
maybe
cool.
Jared Boykin's a little more interesting than these guys.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So okay, well, let's talk about someone that let's talk about talking about failure. Almost always works, right? You can always talk about guys that stink for that you're expected to be good. CJ Spiller the rest of the way. Another one of your guys. What are you doing with him?
He's not one of my guys. I have him on one team. No,
you don't have him on one?
Two. I have him on this Fox League for no money. That's totally irrelevant. One guy I played today had somebody who was out for the year very early on in his lineup. He has somebody out for the year and like before the season started in his lineup.
That's a joke.
Yeah. So
at least a joke then. All right.
But what I'm saying, so I really have him in only one league, and that league I'm like, I'm done. I had Michael Vick starting this week, and obviously that was done. So I don't really care about Spiller personally, and it was just one of those guys that I took, and then I was so immediately when I took him, I was like, oh, I had a Trent Richardson vibe. That's who I should have taken. I had a Trent Richardson vibe. That is funny. I was like, oh, my vibe is, I don't know. I just have this weird feeling Trent Richardson's going to go off, but I took Spiller out of obligation, and the reality is neither of those guys matter at all.
And the correct answer is LaShawn McCoy, although even that is starting to taper off.
Exactly.
Let's look at the Eagles. I mean, they're a disaster right now.
Oh yeah, Matt Barkley is like no better than Charles Barkley, at football that is, and it's basically like it's a joke, man. And their defense sucks, and they're just not good, and it's going to hurt all those guys. And LaShawn McCoy is still going to be okay, I guess, but and look at Adrian Peterson is on a total dumpster fire of a team. I mean, he's on a terrible team, and it's really impacting him too. And so, I mean, Jamal Charles is the only guy in a good situation. He didn't have a big game last week against a tough D, but you could count on him pretty much. Got hurt for a second, but came back in. But there's Forte, and Forte has no more Jay Cutler either. He just lost Jay Cutler.
Right.
And Arian Foster's hurt. Right. All you really got is like Marshawn Lynch, who doesn't catch passes. But
he's caught more this year. He has caught more passes this year.
And then you got No Sean now starting like losing carries to other random guys. I mean, it's a wasteland. I mean, sure you're going to still stick with Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, and a couple other guys, but it's not even good for them. I mean, Jamal Charles is the only guy in a great situation right now.
Right. I mean, there's only one 100-yard running back last week, and that was Andre Ellington. And that part of that is he had an 80-yard run. So I mean, he had 70 other yards, so he was still really good. But
he played against the Falcons at home, though. I mean that's not. I mean, it is ugly for the running backs. I mean, it really bad. And I want to see what Forte does next week without once teams start like not worrying about the receivers as much because of McCown. I think McCown might be okay because they have such good weapons. I mean, to have Forte, Bennett, Martellus that is, not Earl, Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall. That is some very good weapons. And I mean, that's like so maybe McCown will be okay, but man, it is anyone who had any sort of value is being it's just been eviscerated in the running back position.
All right, nobody's happy. Nobody is really happy.
Doug Martin's out for indefinitely, and he sucked even when he played. Ray Rice is not in a good situation anymore. It's all bad.
Yeah. So what's the takeaway? Just draft receivers early, and then just do your best with running backs later.
No, I mean if you could I mean, what turned out this year, kind of, is that the guys that were the most rock solid, like with the job and with the history and everything, were like Lynch, Peterson, sort of the boring, like do the obvious. Those are the guys that have pretty much been the best. Charles is sort of the exception where he's been good historically, but he's been hurt a lot, and he's had a new coach coming in. That was the one sort of variable guy that did well. But most of the guys or just sort of like Forte, Lynch, Peterson. Alfred Morris has been pretty decent. Just sort of the boring. Even at Foster, when he's been healthy, he's been good. Just like the boring, nothing happening, with their team. I thought, Spiller had a new coach and Jackson was coming back, and they thought he would get the carries. Never really had the workload. McCoy's been used to be good. Come back from. I don't know. I'm trying to create a rule out of it, but my bottom line is like, it's almost like the less creative and more like just devoted to last year's stats you were with the running backs, like the better off you did, and the more you were like, oh, this is Spiller's year for the breakout, or this is. I don't know. It seemed like that worked out well. But then again, Ray Rice was the most boring pick ever, and he sucked too.
Yeah, exactly right. All right. On that note, I think that let's leave everybody wallowing in their misery. We'll have Mike here on Thursday. We'll talk staff picks. He and I. You'll be in Mexico or on a plane to Mexico or somewhere. It'll be your turn to be a drug mule. Come back safely.
Yeah.
Don't get caught.
Yeah. Yeah. And I bring the kind of drugs that when the balloon pops, you don't die.
Oh, well, that's good. Good job.
Pack
safely.
That's the difference between me and Mike Gottlieb.
All right. On that note, thanks for watching RotoWire TV. Stay tuned for Thursday. Thanks a lot.